time we have a video on a channel called Inspired Walk, which is really not inspired in any way, shape, or form. It's just another video where they pretend to be asking questions of atheists, when in fact they're only talking to the already deluded. This is something we see time and time again, because I think the religious know they've got nothing of any substance to say to those who reject their ridiculous beliefs for cause. So here we go again, down the theistic rabbit hole. Enjoy!
Do you really believe that science is the only answer to all of life's questions?
Well, that depends on the question. For anything related to reality, yes, science has been shown to be the only currently existent method that routinely and consistently provides objectively demonstrable results. Now, there are questions that relate to personal opinion and preference, and those things have nothing at all to do with science. But they're also not rational questions. They don't have objectively testable and verifiable answers, so science wouldn't have anything to say on those, would it?
If God doesn't exist, why do you care if people worship him?
Because even if there is no God, the belief in such an imaginary being can be demonstrably harmful to human society and humanity as a whole. And it's for the same reason I reject things like the anti-vaxxers, because of the totally false belief that vaccines are harmful and should not be taken. That causes untold harm to the herd immunity that many people depend on.
Seriously, can nothing create something?
Can nothing create something? Well, you seem to think your imaginary friend created everything out of nothing, and in turn came from nowhere. Are you honestly asking that?
If you've never been to the ends of the earth, if you've never been to every planet, if you've never been to every part of the universe, how do you know that God doesn't exist?
I don't claim that God doesn't exist. I argue that there's no objectively justifiable and verifiable evidence that God, any God of any religion, actually exists in the real world. Hence, I reject the unjustified claims made by the religious until they can come up with evidence to present. And that's how rational people operate. They demand evidence before they will accept a proposition. Why don't you give that a try?
What is the origin of life?
Now, that goes beyond the purview of this video, but there are plenty of sources you can go take a look at that will explain it, at least as far as we understand it so far. The one thing that has no evidence of any kind whatsoever is the idea that there's some magical spook in the sky that made it all. But this is really just a giant argument from ignorance. I don't get it, therefore God. You can't invent an explanation out of whole cloth to cover your own ignorance. That's not how this works.
If humans are animals, then where does our sense of justice, where does our sense of morality, where does our sense of what's right and what's wrong come from?
Your morality comes from the same place mine does, enlightened self-interest. It's where everyone's morality ultimately comes from. You simply refuse to acknowledge the clear and demonstrable truth of the situation. In fact, religion is one of many tactics man has invented to impose the will of the strong upon the weak-minded. Do it because God says so, and conveniently, God speaks to me and tells me what you need to do. Sure he does.
If you were given irrefutable evidence that the God of the Bible is real, would you become a Christian?
If I had irrefutable evidence for the existence of your particular God, would I believe in that God? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. Would I become a Christian? No, because your God is a complete asshole. I would want nothing whatsoever to do with your God because your God is a dick. But I'd believe in it because evidence leads to that conclusion. Now, if only I had some evidence, that would be helpful.
Tell me something. If evolution is real, and if evolution is really happening, how come there are no transitional forms that we can observe?
There are. Every single living being, every single fossil of the past, all of them are transitional between their parents and their offspring. That's what being transitional means. Of course, you're ignorant of science because you're too busy reading your book of mythology. But if you'd stop and honestly ask yourself that question, maybe you wouldn't act so ridiculous.
Do you live according to what you believe, or do you live your life according to what you lack in belief?
Obviously, according to what I believe, based on what is most objectively demonstrable to be true. But what you believe is based on emotion. It's based on comfort, not on evidence. Just because it makes you feel good doesn't mean it's actually true. Now, I care about truth. I care about reality. I care about believing the things that are best supported by the objectively verifiable evidence. Unfortunately, the religious do not.
If God doesn't exist and the Christian dies, the Christian loses nothing. But if God does exist and you die as an atheist, do you not lose more? Will you not lose your soul?
That's complete nonsense. The Christian loses the only life that we know we actually have, trying to do unnecessary and often absurd things in pursuit of a future life that isn't demonstrably real. Every shred of evidence we have shows that when we die, we die. All of us. There's no evidence whatsoever for an afterlife. Wishful thinking doesn't make it real.
Hebrews chapter 11 verse 3 says, "By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible."
You seem to think anyone cares about your book of multiple choice. You're supposed to be asking questions of atheists who are clearly not going to be impressed with anything written in the Bible. And this is why I keep pointing out that even when these apologists pretend to be talking to atheists, they're actually only making videos to appeal to the already delusional. No atheist cares about your mythology.
Now, just because we can't visibly see something, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
And it doesn't mean that it does. Of course, we don't demand that we visibly see anything, only that we be able to detect it in some objectively verifiable way. And that's something that the religious have purposely removed as a means of protecting their imaginary friends. The Bible starts off with God walking with Adam and Eve. Now God is inherently undetectable by any means whatsoever. Why? Because the more man discovered about the world, the less space the religious had to stuff God into. And eventually, they just gave up trying.
We cannot see God, but it doesn't mean that God doesn't exist.
It doesn't mean that God does exist either. But the real question is, how do you tell the difference between something you can't detect that actually does exist and something you can't detect that doesn't? And the answer is, you can't. There's no demonstrable difference between the existent and the non-existent if both of them are completely impossible to detect via any objective means. So why should anyone believe in any of them?
For example, we cannot see the wind, but we do feel the wind.
But we do feel the wind. It's detectable. Can we feel God? No? We
also feel the effects of the wind.
Can we feel the effects of God in any demonstrable way? No?
And we also experience the movement of the wind.
Can we experience the movement of God in any demonstrable way? No?
And so the truth is, creation itself testifies of an all-powerful and imaginative creator.
Not in any demonstrable way. All you can do is blindly assert that it happened because you're incapable of dealing with the reality that there's no evidence for your God or your God's involvement in the existence of the universe. So long as all you can do is make empty claims, we will never believe you. You can't meet our standard of evidence, which is the same for your God as it is for everything else. We don't make exceptions. Your God doesn't get a pass.
And so to the atheist, I would encourage you to
turn off your brain and blindly believe, because that's what I want you to do.
Be open-minded to the existence of God.
Well, we are, but not so open-minded that our brains fall out of our heads. We leave that to you.
And to the possibilities of having a relationship with your Creator. Amen.
That's an assertion that you have yet to demonstrate. The only way you're going to convince atheists that what you say is true is to produce objectively verifiable and demonstrable evidence for the actual existence of your God. And if you can't do that, it's not our failure to believe you, it's your failure to demonstrate that anything you say is true. It's all on you. So you better get to work. But of course, they won't, because we all know they can't. If they could, the debate would have been over a long time ago, and they would have won. Instead, religion is going into the dumpster in the modern world. A recent survey in England shows that 52% of the population rejects the belief in gods. That's a majority, and it's growing year after year. Your side is losing at an ever-increasing rate. And that's because you have such a piss-poor record of actually being able to support your beliefs in any objectively and intellectually valid way. Enjoy the ride down, because you're on the losing side of history. And that's a truly glorious thing.
Everything changes.